Hi guys, Oliver here from Spitfire Audio. I'm writing a big symphonic piece inspired by film scores such as Tron, 2001, A Space Odyssey, Vertigo, Interstellar or Sweeney Todd. And what do these film scores have in common? Yes, they feature a big effing organ. And that's what I'm doing here. I'm adding our Spitfire Symphonic Organ to this 1-minute trailer music I've written. Let's have a listen. Pretty epic stuff. So now I'm curious, what kind of films or film scores do you like that feature maybe an unusual instrument or a less common instrument in a kind of orchestral setup? And I'd like for you to comment in the comment section so we can get the conversation going. So first I want to give you some information about the organ and then we dive right into the piece. So the organ is the Rugby School Chapel organ. It's a big organ. It's actually built for a cathedral, but it's used in a smaller chapel setting, and that's the very special thing. So it has a lot of punch, a lot of power, and you can really feel that under your fingertips. If I just play you this all stops preset here, and I'm talking about this in a second, it's just absolutely mind-blowing. The organ has 3,721 pipes, and just to compare, the Notre Dame organ, which is one of the biggest organs in the world, and luckily it survived the recent fire, that one has 7,000 pipes. So the rugby organ has over half the amount of pipes as the Notre Dame organ, but in a much smaller space, and that is really the unique character about it. And I talked about Sweeney Todd before, and this is the exact organ that was used on Sweeney Todd. And the player is Andy Richards, and together with James Williams, who is the head of academic at the school there, they've curated for us 16 presets, and that's the other unique thing about it. These presets are curated by two people who know the organ inside out, and it's definitely a character and artistic library. So you have the 16 presets and 5 pedal presets. Here I show you pedal presets as well. So we got advanced pedals. So as you might know, the organ has not only the manuals that you can play with the hands, but it also has pedals that you play with the foot, which are basically the bass notes, if you will. I mean, really beautiful sound right there. Just a couple more. Another really important and incredible technical aspect is that we've sampled every single key to capture the whole characteristics of the organ. Usually we sample in whole tones or even thirds. Furthermore, we've included lots of different mic positions and signals. So we have inside the organ, we have close valves, we have close ribbons, left-right stereo and ambient settings. We've included some warps in the library as well. So just to quickly play you. So warped sounds, the raw material is taken from the organ and warped through pedals or other sorts of effects by the team. Pretty cool stuff. Right, let's dive into my piece. I'm starting it here with this ethereal swell, which again I find one of the most beautiful sounds of the library. Especially the bottom here. I mean, if you put your headphones on and you listen really closely, it's just a most amazing sound. Let me just show you what I'm playing here. Wow, such a cool sound right there. And this one here is basically my main theme. You will hear it over again in the whole piece. Then I'm starting these arpeggiated notes with 2 different settings. So here the woolly flutes and then mixtures, which is a more brighter sound here. Which I'm fading in slowly to ramp up for the big organ shots here. And just if you're interested in the chords, it's based around C minor or kind of minor major, because I'm using the B here, and then the chords are C minor, it goes to F, goes to A flat, and it goes to F sharp diminished, to G, dominant 7 chords with a flat 9 if you want to get all technical here, and then resolving in C minor. That's it. That's the whole piece. So nothing too complicated. I don't think it needs to be either. So then I'm using the whole symphonic range here. So I'm using symphonic strings, symphonic brass, symphonic woodwinds, and then here the Spitfire percussion. And I'm using Eric Whittaker choir, and I feel the choir and the organ just blends in really, really beautifully. If we just solo the organ and the choir together. And then here, full tilt organ. And by the way, I'm pretty sure that this is the preset that comes closest to the Sweeney Todd sound. See what you think, let me know, have a listen and compare the 2 sounds. But I'm really pretty certain that is almost the exact same preset. Which is absolutely amazing that you've got that kind of sound under your fingertips. Let's have a quick listen to just the choir. So it's a pretty lumpy orchestration there, actually. Lots of long-held notes, but I just wanted to get that texture, that kind of stuff. Soprano there. The evolutions, so the notes are slowly evolving and doing their own thing. Using the normal R's there, just to add to the epicness, I guess, of the piece. Right, let's get into the strings section. As said, I'm using Spitfire symphonic strings, apart from Albion 5 here for some high tremolos, and the solo cello legato. Just gonna solo it. Show you here the MIDI information. Okay, let's have a quick look in detail what's going on here. So I'm using a lot of flautando here just to create that soft texture. Sounds, again, I'll play it for you just in a second with the organ and the choir. So here I'm using each individual section, violin 2, flautando, and then here viola, some tremolos. Just to build up tension. Flautando here. I just love that kind of long flautando sound. First violin. And you can hear, I'm getting to it with a mix a bit later. I'm really panning out each section, each instrument section to achieve this 3D big sound. And then, a bit cheeky there, an extra section. High violins. Albion 5, beautiful traveling trems. It's like just a tiny bit of fairy dust on top, very gentle. And then I'm using the solo cello legato here. To me, one of the most agile libraries here to write with. Repeating my main theme that I've introduced with the organ before, that I've showed you. Important, the notes are overlapping because it's a legato patch, as I always say. Modulation programming to get realism into it, as well as expression and vibrato. So here you can hear pretty nicely how the player starts doing the vibrato towards the end of the note. More sul pont here, and violin 1 sul pont as well, just to ramp up towards that big shot. Even in the basses. And then I'm changing the tone. I'm using the normal longs just to add a little bit more oomph in the string section as well. Here the violin 1 is playing a trill, which is recorded like this. Runs. Tremolo. Runs. And as you can hear, everything pans towards the left where the first violin is sitting. Let's have a listen to the second violin, to their part. Sul pont. So as you can see, I'm not using key switches. For each articulation, I'm using a different track. So for me, it's a better overview. Let's check out the viola part, legato as well here. So I pay attention that it works quite nicely with the second violin and the cello as well, which I'm going to add now. So the solo cello is blending then into the cello longs here. So I imagine the main solo cellist sitting there and then playing up in his solo part and then slowly melting back into the section. And let's have a listen, as I said, how this interacts with the viola and the second violin. The first violin, as you heard before, is doing its own thing, basically. It's doing runs and more wild stuff, just to keep it busy, basically in the background. The bass is doing some lovely bits in the intro. Just following the chord structure, basically. Pretty cool. Some here as well. Here I have no bass because it's very busy, and the organ is doing its full tilt stuff with the pedals down here on in my left hand, and it's enough. It doesn't need to have bass there as well. So here it is again, the string section. I just want to play you the beginning actually with the ethereal sounds there and the choir, which is just mind-blowing. Let's have a look at the brass section here. So the brass is doing its own thing. It has its own kind of rhythm, and that is very much inspired by the Sweeney Todd soundtrack as well. If you have a listen, with these kind of call and answer and these little marcato lines. So again, it's mainly driven by these marcato notes here. I like using them because it's recorded longs or longer shorts, and you don't need to program that much. And I feel personally that it conveys big realism there. Let's have a listen to the horns, for example. And I increase the velocity, so it gets more raspy up there. Same with the trumpets. It's just complementing the chord. And then the trombones together with the bass trombones, creating call and answer. Well, basically they're the call, and trumpets and horns are the answer. And I feel it has enough space because the strings, the choir, and the organ really creates this ethereal atmosphere there. And then in the end, it's going full tilt, marcato again there, because I really love that patch and it feels quite natural, but I just have the velocity all the way up, so it has that raspy sound on all of the sections. And then I have multi-tongue in there, again, because that's a recorded sound. For me, it just conveys more realism than me programming very fast staccato notes. So, in case you didn't get that. Pretty handy articulation. Doubling up with the bass trombone to get more oomph in there. Again, up here, trumpet, multi-tongue as well. Very cool sound, one of my favorites. Then I'm using Albion for low brass, in case you missed it here within the composition. So it's these phrases, and I thought that's pretty cool for this big shot there. And then low brass sting, which I absolutely like and love. Pretty epic sound. All together here. It adds a certain uneasiness because it bends a little bit out of tune. The woodwinds, I'm just doing very subtle stuff. The woodwinds actually here in the beginning, the flutes and the piccolo, they go together with the xylophone. I think I stole this trick a little bit from Bernard Herrmann, who has done, I think, xylophone and trumpet or something like that. And here I'm using xylophone and flutes and piccolo. It's quite a unique sound there. The harp actually as well is interacting with it. The bassoon is taking over a bit of a counterpoint melody. And then here the cello is taking on the bassoon solo. So as you can see, I'm trying to interlink everything and orchestration and arrangement wise to kind of make sense of like the different parts, but yet not to over kind of fill my arrangements because there is a lot of sections there. Runs. So whenever I go for a big hit towards the one, I'm approaching this with a run of the flutes and actually the first violin as well. The harp as well does a glissando there, so it helps with the approach of that organ shot. So I'm doing a minor C harmonic minor. Then my percussion section, very important in this orchestral setup. And Paul helped me out a lot here actually, giving a couple of feedbacks using the percussion right in the mix. Because if you imagine, for example, the cymbal in an orchestral setup, it's always really loud if they really hit the cymbals and the bass drums as well. So let's have a quick listen. It comes in more later. And actually here I've got I'm using a bit of an Arvo Pärt trick. If you don't know Arvo Pärt, please check him out. He's an amazing composer. And I'm using the bass drum with the clave. So this kind of sound. Which I find such a brilliant sound. Then I'm using this cymbal swell here. Bass drum roll and tubular bells. So everything from the Spitfire percussion library. So they're all fitting nicely because they're all recorded in the same spot. Just to add a little bit of epicness, tubular bells, organ, knights, kind of maybe vampire, Sweeney Todd. So that's all that kind of vibe right there. Then just hitting accents on the one, really, really simple. Bring in a snare as well towards the end to really ramp up. So there we go. That's my percussion arrangement. Now let's have a quick listen to the organ again here in the second part. I'm using the full organ, the all stops, all these kind of epic presets. So then here again in the end I'm using my main theme, which is this motif. And here with the mixture preset, I'm basically just doubling up what the full organ plays here. Just an octave higher. And a combination of the two adds a certain drama. Right, let's have a look at the mix. So I find it important to always group each section. So here I have the choir. If we dive here into the mixing window, bus 21, which comes out here, choir here, and I have my separate bus for each of the sections. And then I'm slightly compressing each section, but just a little bit. Let me show you how I compress the choir, for example. Using the Waves plugin here, our compressor, which I quite like. I'm starting with the vocal preset. Attack pretty fast, release pretty fast as well. Ratio around 4:1. So as you can see, just a touch, and I'm adding quite a bit of gain because I want this quiet section here in the beginning just to be lifted a little bit without having that back here too loud. So it's, as you can see, it kicks in just very gently right there because I want it to keep really organic and not really smashing it and squeezing it that hard. Then for the strings, as you can imagine, we have a much slower attack here. Also adding quite a bit of gain for that beginning section to be a little bit louder. So the compressor actually doesn't kick in within my first section. So again, compressor just very gentle right there. And then, as I was already saying, I really pan all of the instruments into my right spot. So here my first violins towards the left here, the tremolos I've left there because I have them so reverby, and as I said, it's just a bit of sparkle, so I leave them kind of everywhere in the room. Towards the left, as I said, violin 1, violin 2, a little bit more to the center, violas I completely left centered, cello more to the right, and the basses all the way to the right. And I tweaked the volume there so my string section sounds in balance. So each of the section, they've got a sound in balance. And I've done the same actually before with the choir here as well. The Evos I've left because, again, that's kind of a reverby, beautiful, eerie kind of sound. And then soprano, alto, tenor, bass, I've placed them in the according spot. Let's have a look at the brass. As you can imagine, again, faster attack. So all the instruments have quite a harsh input or a harsh start, a harsh attack. You got to take the signal quite early and compress it. I mean, other than you want something creative, but I don't want any creative compressing there. I just want for the piece to be nicely balanced. Oh, by the way, my EQ here, you might wonder, for the strings, is just roll off the bottom ends a little bit. Actually, it might be a bit much for the bass. And around 2K, I'm taking out a little bit of the signal because that's just a personal preference. I find the sound there sometimes a little bit metallic. Nothing to do with sample library, of course, but even in real strings, that's kind of my preferred sounds right there. Brass. Fast attack, medium release. Nothing's happening just yet. Again, just very little. On the woodwinds. Again, just a touch, adding a little bit of gain as well. Similar setting to the brass, because also kind of a fast attack and medium kind of release. For the harp, I'm mainly using reverb here for the glissando as well. So the harp is quite gentle, is quite reverby anyway, and it's just there to add a touch. I don't need any compression on there. I guess the main question always is, does it need compression and not just use it so you use it? But I use it on the bass just to unify the sound a little bit. Then the percussion I kind of leave as is. I just use a little bit of compression for the bass drum. So individual percussion, I have summed them up in one bus, again, because I just do that as a practice in a big piece like that, but no extra compression. And the same with the organ actually, because also for demo purposes, I just wanted to show the raw sounds. And to be honest, it doesn't really need any compression right there. Let's dive into the reverb. So as you can see, I'm using quite a big amount of external reverb here. For example, this soprano stuff here, the evolutions. The choir has quite a big reverb on it. The high strings. Usually on the high instruments, I put much more reverb than on the low ends, because on the low ends it tends to get muddy. So here you can see the same thing. Trumpets, horns, and then the reverb decreases as the instrument gets lower. I'm using Fab Filter here as well. Concert Hall Vienna recommendation from Christian. I also use VSS3 or the Lexicon here and there, but I'm just kind of experimenting a little bit with this one and trying it out, and I must say it's very nice. Then for the master, I usually try to be around -3 without any plugins, minus or even -6. So I don't compose and mix in really high levels. I prefer to have a little bit of leeway there or headroom for the mastering. So I put a compressor on there. Again, I'm starting with the preset here. Very slow attack, kind of fast release. And the threshold's not too much. The ratio very low as well. And if we just play the piece here, you can see there's not much master compression happening there. And I want a flow attack, so I really don't want to pump the piece to pump or to feel it kind of choked. And then I add this stereo imager, Pensado 3D width. It just makes it sound much wider. These presets here and there, actually, they're quite good. I just recommend putting it on and using your ears and listening, but not overdo it and just throw on everything. If it sounds good already, it sounds good, and you don't need to throw on anything else. L2. I think one of my favorite limiters, and I just put that high-res master here just to be in the loudness war. I usually go on Spotify and compare the tracks, and then I can decide a little bit how loud I want it and how squeezed I want it. Cut ceiling here, always -0.3. So far, that's kind of how I've learned it and how I've always been doing it. So I think that's pretty standard. I don't recommend to doing it too loud or anything like that, because the platforms, they will just limit it and squeeze it and will just not do any good to your music. Cool, that's it. I hope this was insightful, and I also hope you get to enjoy the symphonic organ. If you have any comments or questions or other tips and tricks regarding mixing, please leave them in the comment section. I'm always happy to learn, and I'm sure other people would appreciate some new tips and tricks as well. Thank you very much for listening and watching. I'm going to play you the whole piece one more time. See you in the next one. Bye bye.